Hey everybody, in this recording we're going to take a quick look at the Puppet Pin tools in After Effects. Get you started using the Puppet Pin tools to do distortion effects, and also you can use them to do some cool animated typography as well. So we'll start from scratch here. I'm going to make a new project. And I've got one asset here that I'm going to import. This is a Photoshop file. This is from an old edition of the Adobe After Effects Classroom in a Book, which is the recommended textbook that I use in my classes. So I'm going to pull this file into After Effects. It's just a single layer, so it doesn't give me any layer options. Just bring it in as a single footage item. And then I'm going to create a composition to do my demonstration in. And 15 seconds should be fine. I'll hit OK. And then add the asset to the composition. You can see the resolution of the asset is quite a bit larger. So I'll go ahead and hit S for scale. Scaling it down a little bit. There we go. Something like that. And what I want to do is animate the character walking across the screen here. So in previous lesson, I showed how to do something like this by, breaking the asset up into layers and then animating the individual layers using the transform properties. But in this example, I'm going to use this tool right here called the Puppet Pin tool. There's actually a group of tools in this group here. There's several tools in this group that all give you the ability to distort and deform your layer. So we'll start with the one at the top here, Puppet Pin tool. And basically the way this works is you simply click on areas of the layer where you want to be able to either pull or stretch the layer or anchor it in place. So you need to have at least 2 pins on the layer for this to work. So if I put one on the hand here and one at the shoulder and then drag the one on the hand, you see it stretches the layer. So that's what I meant when I said this is a distortion effect. And in fact, if you look at the effect controls, you'll see that it has added an effect to the layer called Puppet. You can also see that there is kind of an overlay of triangles. This is what we call the distortion mesh. If this checkbox here in the option bar is checked, you will see the distortion mesh, and that is how it is distorting the layer by using these polygons. Now, basically, you want to add a Puppet pin wherever you want to be able to anchor or stretch the layer. So I'm going to put one on each shoulder, one on each hand, one on each foot, and one at the top of each leg, something like that. And the nice thing about this Puppet Pin tool, it's one of the few things in After Effects that automatically animates when you move the pins. You do not have to click the animation stopwatch for anything. Basically, all you have to do is move the time marker to a new point in time and then drag the pin to a new location, and a keyframe is automatically recorded. So no need to even go down into the timeline, unless, of course, you want to see the keyframes. But by just dragging the pin at a new point in time, a position keyframe for that pin is automatically created. Now, if we look at the timeline, we can see in the effect group, the puppet group, and then mesh within there, deform within there, you're going to see a group for each of the pins that you've created, and any that are animated, you'll see these little dots indicating that there are keyframes within that group. There's a position property for each pin that you create. So one way of animating this, like I said, is by just moving the time marker to a new point in time and then dragging the pin. But another way you have of animating the Puppet Pin tool is by making use of the motion sketch feature. The motion sketch feature, which I introduced in a previous lesson, gives you the ability to draw position paths. And one of the nice things about the Puppet Pin tool is it has that motion sketch functionality built right into it. All you have to do is hold the Command key as you drag one of the pins. See, when I hold the Command key and go over one of the pins, you see a little stopwatch icon appears. So if we hold the Command key on the Mac or the Control key on the PC and then simply drag the pin, it will record the movement. So instead of setting the keyframes one at a time, we can hold the Command key or Control key on the PC and then just motion sketch the movement. See how easy that is? Pretty cool. All right, so that's the basic idea of how this Puppet Pin tool works. Now, there are, of course, a few other things to know about the Puppet Pin tool, as well as some other tools that are hidden within the group here, so I want to touch on just a few of those things. One thing to know is that there is more than one Puppet engine. That is the engine that it's using to calculate the distortions. The default setting here is Advanced, which is the newer version of the Puppet effect, which you probably want to stick with that one if you're on a relatively new computer, but there is still the legacy engine available here if you are encountering any render issues and you're on an older machine. You might switch back to the legacy engine. And of course, that's in here for backwards compatibility as well. Now, I'm going to go ahead and animate my character walking in place so that I can make it look like he's walking across the screen here. So I'm going to bring my time marker back to 0, and I'm going to drag my pins to a sort of first pose. I'm going to go a few frames forward, maybe like half a second, and then I'm going to drag the pins to set my second position, and I'm going to drag the arms, and there's some issues that are going to be created here as I do this. So I'm going to continue to animate this until I've got a few seconds laid out. So in fact, I'm going to go ahead and pause my recording while I do that. Okay, so I've animated a few seconds of the character walking in place, arms and legs moving back. Down here in the timeline, if I push the U key, I can reveal my keyframes. And, you know, just like when you're animating any property, you can copy and paste keyframes. So if I want to extend this for a few more seconds here, I can copy and paste groups of keyframes to duplicate my animation. Copy, paste, Command C, Command V. Okay, so now I've got a few seconds of the character walking. And now I'm going to hit P for position. Or in fact, before I do that though, before I animate the position of the layer to make it look like he's moving across the frame, a few things I wanted to show here. Let me zoom in a little bit. One is as the character is animating, and let me deselect everything here so we can see it without the wireframe, you may notice some intersection issues. See, like right here, for example, take a look at when the legs cross over. It doesn't necessarily know which part of the layer that I want to be in front. So one of the other tools here in the Puppet Pin group that I wanted to introduce is the one called Puppet Overlap Pin. And if we select that one, make sure we have our effect selected so we can see the mesh that it's using. Now, notice that because I've animated the character moving, when I see the mesh, it's showing me the shape of the actual layer, the way that the layer was before I stretched and deformed it. And you can see the location of all of these distortion polygons within the mesh. So to tell it which part of the layer should always be in front, we can take this puppet overlap tool, and then what we want to do is we want to click on these polygons, click on these intersection points of these polygons like this so that they get filled in gray. And that is letting it know that these polygons should always be in front. And it doesn't really matter how many of these pins it takes you to do this. You basically just want to gray in as much of that area as possible, so it knows, okay, this area should always be, there we go, always be in front. All these polygons should always be in front. So now if I deselect everything and take a look at it again, see, now that intersection issue is solved. That leg is always going to be in front of the other leg. Okay, we have the same issue here happening with the upper body, with the torso, as that arm goes behind it, right? There's a little intersection happening there. So again, if I wanted to fix that, I would reselect the effect, make sure my mesh is showing, take my overlap tool, and then gray in some of these polygons here. And again, to do that, you want to click right on these kind of intersection points so that the polygons get grayed in like that. Don't just click loosely in the middle of them. Okay, so something like this. So that whole part now will be in front, although that might create an issue with the other arm. Yeah, you can see now this. So you got to think about that stuff, right? This is one of the advantages to doing these type of animations with layers instead of using the distortion tool to do it all in a single layer. So keep that in mind. Now, if you make a mistake like I just did, you can open up your layer down here in the timeline, go to your effect, go to your puppet group, and any of the pins that you've added are going to show up in this mesh group. So overlap pins, if I want to get rid of some of these overlap pins, that are not working for me here, if I select that, and then I can go through here and just delete these pins. So, oops, undo, I deleted too many. But we can get rid of any pins that we don't need. So, okay, so one of the other tools in the puppet pin group here that I want to touch on is the one called the puppet starch pin. This one comes in useful for basically stiffening areas of the layer that may be distorting a bit more than you would like them to. So in my example here, for example, the head of the character as he's walking, you can see the head is kind of deforming and distorting a little more than maybe I would like it to. So up here in the toolbar, if I switch to the puppet starch tool, the second one in the group here, and then when I bring the cursor over the layer, you can see the mesh is displayed. And basically, I'm going to click to create a starch pin in the area that I want to kind of firm up. And it doesn't gray in the polygons like the overlap tool did. Basically, you can use the expansion and density values here to kind of control how many polygons there are. So if it's not like stiffening the area enough, you can try expanding, bringing up the expansion a little bit, the density. That controls the number of, say, polygons. See the expansion, if we crank that up, that actually expands the edges of the polygons, and the density, if we bring that up, the number of polygons. So that will affect, of course, all the pins, not just the starch pin. Now down here in the timeline, you'll see that it has added another pin to the deform group, but the pin type is set to starch. It doesn't have a position property like the regular position pins do. But you can see that it's kind of firmed up that area. Doesn't hold it completely in place, but it's firmer than it was before. Okay, so that's the starch tool. And then the remaining two tools that you see in the Puppet group, we might as well mention those as well. The one called the Puppet Bend tool and the Puppet Advanced Pin tool. These tools basically give you the ability to add rotation, scale, as well as position to an individual pin. Now, I believe these pins can only be used if you are using the advanced Puppet engine, not the legacy engine. So these were tools that were added with the new advanced Puppet features. And to demonstrate this real quick, I'll just do a separate comp with the file in it. And let me zoom out a little bit. And if I take the Puppet Bend tool, for example, and let's say I click here on this shoulder, you can see that it adds a pin, but it also adds a circle around that pin. Now, I'm going to go ahead and grab the Puppet Advanced tool and add some additional pins. Notice those add a circle as well. So I'm going to add a couple here at the legs and the shoulders. And if I look at the mesh group down below, you'll see that the first one, the Bend tool pin, has just a rotation and a scale. And if I adjust the rotation value there, that part of the layer rotates around that pin. Okay, the other ones that I added, the ones that show here in green, basically the same thing, except they give you a position as well as scale and rotation. Okay, so you've got a scale value for that pin, you've got a rotation value for that pin, and a position value that can, of course, be animated using the same techniques. So that's really the only difference. The original Puppet position pin gives you just position, and that works in both the legacy and the advanced Puppet engine. But the newer Puppet Bend pin gives you rotation and scale for the pin, and Puppet Advanced gives you all three, position, scale, and rotation. Okay, and then again, just remember the overlap for specifying which parts of the layer should appear in front when parts of the layer cross over other parts of the layer, and the starch pin for stiffening areas of the layer. So those are your 5 Puppet pin tools. Now for the last part of this demo, I just want to relate this back to working with text. So going back to my main comp here, where I've got my character walking. And in fact, before I move on, let me just hit P for position, set a couple position keyframes here because I want him to walk across the frame. So as he's walking in place, I'm going to go ahead and slide that across. See how that looks. So there we go. He's taking a few steps across the frame. And then I'm going to have some text animate into the frame. So I'm going to grab my type tool. I'm going to create a text layer. I'm just going to keep it very simple here with a couple letters. Whoops. There we go. Go ahead and apply that. And let me use the properties panel here to scale my text up, make it nice and large. And in fact, I want to center it in the frame, so I'll hit P for position, right-click on the word position and choose a reset. That will center it within the frame. And then I'll use the baseline shift parameter here to vertically offset it. Okay, that looks good enough. Let me bring the vertical scale down a little bit. And so I just wanted to show that the Puppet Pin tool is not just useful for animating your graphics, but also animating text. So for example here, if we do Puppet Position and I click on the H, you can see that it is adding a mesh around the H, and I'll go ahead and add some dots here on the I as well. And I'm going to go ahead and just animate the text kind of coming into the frame here. So in fact, I'm going to animate in reverse because it's in the sort of final position already. So I'll go forward a second and then I'll drag the keyframe or drag the pin points. Go another second forward here and drag them some more. So I'm just doing this at 1 second intervals until I get it out of the frame. And this can be a fun way to do animated text, very distortion-like text animation. And just a few more frames here until I have that letter out of the frame completely. And if I scrub back through there, you can see it animates in. Okay, and then I'll do the same thing here with the I. I'm going to have the letter I animate in. And that's even simpler because just a couple points here. And then same thing here with that dot. I'm going to have the dot just come, whoops, just come moving in from off of the top, perhaps. There we go. Now, of course, I've done this in reverse, so it's actually moving out of the frame, not into the frame. So I'll select the layer, hit the U key to reveal keyframes, and again, reverse the animation by selecting the keyframes and doing Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Time Reverse. That reverses the animation. I also want to speed it up. I'm going to Option drag the last keyframe there to scrunch them all closer together, speed it all up. And I want the maybe the dot on the I to come in later, so I'll slide those over. And can, of course, slide these keyframes around to play with the timing as needed. Okay, I think that'll work fine for this demo. There we go, that's fun. So I'll adjust my keyframe placement overall here, just so there's some overlap. So as the character is walking out, the other stuff is already starting to come in. And I'll set my work area and load a quick preview. So character walks by and the letters come in. All right, hopefully this gives you some ideas for getting started here with the Puppet Pin tools, how you can use it to animate your layers, distort your layers, and also use it as yet another way to do creative typography. Hopefully this helps you out. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.